Virtual Books Publisher presents The New California Lima Barreto. No one knew where that man had come from. The postmaster had only been able to say that he went by the name of Raimundo Flamel, because that was how the correspondence he received was signed. And it was a lot. Almost every day, the postman went to one of the ends of the city where the stranger lived, weighing a large bundle of letters from all over the world, thick magazines in convoluted languages, books, packages. When Fabricio, the bricklayer, returned from working at the new residence house, everyone in the store asked him what job he had been given. "I'm going to build an oven," said the black man, in the dining room. Imagine the astonishment of the small town of Tubiacanga when they learned of such an extravagant construction, an oven in the dining room, and over the next few days Fabricio was able to tell that he had seen glass balloons, blunt knives, glasses like those from the pharmacy, a list of strange things, appearing on the tables and shelves like utensils from a kitchen set in which the devil himself cooked. The alarm went off in the town. For some, the more advanced, he was a counterfeit currency maker. For others, the simple-minded believers, he was a guy who had a pact with the devil. Chico da Tirana, the carter, when he passed in front of the mysterious man's house next to the creaking car and looked at the smoking chimney in the dining room, would not fail to cross himself and pray a creed in a low voice. And had it not been for the pharmacist's intervention, the deputy police chief would have gone to surround the house of that suspicious individual who was disturbing the imagination of an entire population. Taking Fabricio's information into consideration, the apothecary Bastos concluded that the stranger must have been a wise man, a great chemist, who had taken refuge there to pursue his scientific work more peacefully, an educated and respected man in the city, a councilman, and a doctor too, because Dr. Geronimo did not like to prescribe and had become a partner in the pharmacy to live more peacefully. Bastos's opinion brought peace to everyone's conscience and caused the population to surround the person of the great chemist who had come to live in the city with silent admiration. In the afternoon, if they saw him strolling along the banks of the Tubiacanga, sitting here and there, gazing lost in thought at the clear waters of the stream, meditating before the penetrating melancholy of the twilight, everyone would take off their hats, and it was not uncommon for them to add doctor to their good nights. And the deep sympathy with which he treated children, the way he looked at them, seeming to take pity on the fact that they were born to suffer and die, touched the hearts of those people. In truth, one could see, under the soft sweetness of the afternoon, the kindness of Messias as he caressed those black children, so smooth of skin and so sad of manner, immersed in their moral captivity, and also the white ones, with dull, cracked, and rough skin, living sheltered in the necessary cachexia of the tropics. Sometimes he felt like wondering why Bernardin de Saint-Pierre had spent all his tenderness on Paulo and Virginia and forgotten about the slaves who surrounded them. In a few days, admiration for the wise man was almost universal, and not only because there were some who did not think highly of the merits of the new inhabitant. Captain Pelino, schoolteacher and editor of the Gazeta de Tubiacanga, a local newspaper affiliated with the government party, was annoyed with the wise man. "You'll see," he said, "who this guy is. A deadbeat, an adventurer, or perhaps a thief who escaped from Rio." His opinion was based on nothing, or rather it was based on his hidden spite at seeing on earth a rival for the fame of wisdom that he enjoyed. Not that Pelino was a chemist, far from it, but he was wise, he was a grammarian. No one wrote in Tubiacanga who wasn't given a beating by Captain Pelino, and even when someone mentioned a notable man in Rio, he wouldn't fail to say, "There's no doubt, the man has talent, but he writes another, otherwise," and he would purse his lips as if he had swallowed something bitter. The entire village of Tubiacanga became accustomed to respecting the solemn Pelino, who corrected and amended the greatest national glories. A wise man. In the evening, after reading a little Sotero, Candido de Figueiredo or Castro Lopez, and having dyed his hair once more, the old schoolmaster would slowly leave the house, tightly buttoned in his denim jacket from Minas Gerais, and head towards Bastos's pharmacy to chat. Talking is a way of speaking because Pelino was stingy with words, limiting himself to just listening. However, When the slightest incorrect language escaped someone's lips, he would intervene and correct it. I assure you, said the postmaster, that at that point the schoolteacher intervened with evangelical gentleness. Don't say asseguro, Senor Bernardes. In Portuguese, it is garanto. And the conversation continued after the amendment, only to be interrupted again by another one. For these and other reasons, many speakers left, but Pelino, indifferent, sure of his duties, continued his apostolate of vernacularism. The arrival of the wise man came to distract him a little from his mission. All his efforts were now focused on fighting that rival, who had appeared so unexpectedly. His words and his eloquence were in vain. Not only did Raimundo Flamel pay his bills on time, how generous he was, father of poverty, and the pharmacist, had seen his name mentioned in a specialist magazine as a valuable chemist. The chemist had been living in Tubiacanga for years when, one fine morning, Bastos saw him enter the pharmacy. The pharmacist's pleasure was immense. The wise man had not deigned to visit anyone until then, and one day, when the sacristan Orestes dared to enter his house, asking him for alms for the future feast of Our Lady of the Conception, it was with visible annoyance that he received him and granted his request. Seeing him, Bastos came out from behind the counter, ran to welcome him with the most perfect demonstration of someone who knew who he was dealing with, and almost in an exclamation he said, "Doctor, welcome, the wise." Man seemed not to be surprised either by the pharmacist's display of respect or by the university treatment. She gently looked at the medicine cabinet for a moment and replied, "I wanted to speak to you in private." Mr. Bastos, the pharmacist, was very surprised. How could he be of any use to the man whose name was known around the world and of whom the newspapers spoke with such great respect? Would it be money? Maybe. A delay in paying rent, who knows? And he led the chemist into the house, under the astonished gaze of the apprentice who, for a moment, let his hand rest on the mortar, where he was steeping some herbal tea. Finally, at the back, right at the back, he found the little room that was used for more detailed medical examinations or for small operations, because Bastos also operated. They sat down and Flamel wasted no time in explaining, "As you must know, I dedicate myself to chemistry. I have a respected name in the learned world. I know perfectly well, doctor. I have even informed my friends about it here." "Thanks. Well then, I have made a great, extraordinary discovery." Embarrassed by his enthusiasm, the wise man paused and then continued, "A discovery. But it is not convenient for me, for now, to communicate it to the wise world. Do you understand?" "Perfectly. That's why I needed 3 respected people who could witness one of her experiments and give me a formal certificate, to protect the priority of my invention. You know, there are unforeseen events and, of course, there is no doubt. Imagine that you are trying to make gold." "How? What?" Bastos said, his eyes widening. "Yes, gold," said Flamel firmly. "How?" "You will know," said the chemist dryly. "The question at the moment is who should watch the experience, don't you think? Of course your rights must be protected because—" "One of them," interrupted the wise man as you. "Mr. Bastos will be so kind as to point out the other 2 to me." The pharmacist thought for a moment, reviewing his knowledge, and after about 3 minutes he asked, "Is Colonel Bentes any good to you? Do you know?" "No. You know I don't get along with anyone here. I can assure you that he is a serious, rich, and very discreet man. And religious? I ask you this question," Flamel added at once, "because we have to deal with the bones of dead men and only these are of use." "What? And almost an atheist?" "Well, accepted. And the other one?" Bastos thought again, and this time he spent a little longer consulting his memory. Finally, he said, "It will be Lieutenant Carvalhais, the collector, you know." "As I said. It's true, and a trustworthy man, serious, but what's wrong, and a Freemason? Better. And when is it?" At first, the gravedigger thought they were dogs, but after searching the wall carefully, he found nothing but small holes. Close them. It was useless. The next day, a perpetual tomb was broken into and the bones looted. In the other, a ram and a shallow grave. It was either people or demons. The gravedigger no longer wanted to continue the research on his own. He went to the deputy and the news spread throughout the city. Sunday. On Sunday, the three of you will come to my house to witness the experiment, and I hope you will not refuse me your signatures to authenticate my discovery. It is settled. On Sunday, as promised, the three respectable people from Tubiacanga went to Flamel's house, and a few days later, mysteriously, he disappeared without leaving any trace or explanation for his disappearance. Tubiacanga was a small town of 3,000 or 4,000 inhabitants, very peaceful, at whose station from time to time the express trains did the honor of stopping. For 5 years there had not been a single theft or robbery recorded. The doors and windows were only used because the river used them. The only crime noted in its poor record was a murder on the occasion of the municipal elections, but considering that the murderer was from the government party and the victim from the opposition, the event did not change the habits of the town in the least, and it continued to export its coffee and to look out from its low, cramped houses at the sparse waters of the small river that had given it its name. But how surprised were the inhabitants when one of the most repugnant crimes in living memory was committed there. It was not a dismemberment or parricide. It was not the murder of an entire family or a robbery at the tax office. It was something worse, sacrilegious in the eyes of all religions and consciences. The graves of Sossego, its cemetery, were being violated. The indignation in the city took on all forms and all desires. The religion of death precedes all and will certainly be the last to die in consciences. The 6 Presbyterians of the place cried out against the desecration. The biblical ones, as the people call them, cried out Agrimensor Nicolau, a former cadet and positivist of the Teixeira Mendes Rite, cried out Major Camanho, president of the Nova Esperança Lodge, cried the Turkish Miguel Abudala, a haberdasher, and the skeptical Belmiro, a former student who lived at random, sipping parati in the taverns. The daughter of the resident engineer of the railroad, who lived disdaining that little village, not even noticing the size of the local lovers, always waiting for the express train to bring a prince to marry her. The beautiful and disdainful, Cora could not help but share the indignation and horror that such an act had provoked in everyone in the village. What did she have to do with the tombs of former slaves and humble farmers? What interest could her beautiful brown eyes have in the fate of such humble bones? Would their theft disturb her dream of making the beauty of her mouth, her eyes, and her bust shine on the sidewalks of Rio? Certainly not. But it was death, the implacable and omnipotent death, to which she also felt herself a slave, and which would not fail to one day take her beautiful little skull to the eternal peace of the cemetery. There Cora wanted her bones to rest peacefully, quietly and comfortably in a well-made coffin and in a safe tomb, after her flesh had been the delight and pleasure of the worms. The most indignant, however, was Polino. The professor had published a leading article, cursing, bellowing, shouting, "In the history of the crime," he said, "already quite rich in repugnant facts, such as the dismemberment of Maria de Macedo, the strangling of the Fuoco brothers, there is none recorded that is as repugnant as the looting of the tombs of Sossego." And the town lived in shock. Peace was no longer visible on faces, business was paralyzed, courtships were suspended. For days and days dark clouds hung over the houses, and at night everyone heard noises, groans, and supernatural sounds. It seemed as if the dead were asking for revenge. The looting, however, continued. Every night 2 or 3 graves were opened and emptied of their funereal contents. The entire population decided to go en masse to guard the bones of their elders. They went early, but soon, giving in to fatigue and sleep, one then another left, and by dawn there was no longer a single guard. That same day, the gravedigger noticed that 2 graves had been opened, and the bones taken to a mysterious destination. They then organized a guard. 10 determined men swore before the deputy to keep watch over the mansion of the dead at night. There was nothing unusual on the first night, the second, and the third, but on the fourth, when the guards were getting ready to take a nap, one of them thought he saw a figure sneaking through the sheepfold. They ran and managed to capture 2 of the vampires. The anger and indignation which had been suppressed until then could no longer be contained, and they struck the macabre thieves so hard that they left them lying as if they were dead. The news soon spread from house to house, and when in the morning it was time to establish the identity of the two criminals, it was in front of the entire population that they were recognized as Collector Carvalhai and Colonel Bentes, a wealthy farmer and president of the council. The latter was still alive, and, when asked repeatedly, he was able to say that he collected bones to make gold, and that his companion who had escaped was a pharmacist. There was astonishment and hope. How could gold be made from bones? Was it possible? But how would that rich, respected man stoop to the role of a thief of the dead if the thing were not true? If it were possible, if a few thousand rays could be made from those miserable funeral remains, how good it would be for all of them. The postman, whose old dream was his son's graduation, saw a way to achieve it right there. Castriotto, the clerk of the Justice of the Peace, who last year managed to buy a house but had not yet been able to fence it, thought about the wall, which should protect his vegetable garden and his livestock. Through the eyes of the farmer Marquez, who had been struggling for years to find pasture, he immediately thought of the green meadow of Costa, where his oxen would grow fat and gain strength. Those bones that were gold would come to meet each one's needs, satisfy and congratulate them. And those 2,000 or 3,000 people, men, children, women, young and old, as if they were one person, ran to the pharmacist's house. With difficulty, the deputy was able to stop them from ransacking the pharmacy and get them to stay in the square, waiting for the man who had the secret of an entire Potosi. He didn't take long to appear. Perched on a chair, holding in his hand a small gold bar that shone in the strong morning sun, Bastos asked for mercy, promising to teach the secret if his life was spared. "We want to know now," they shouted. He then explained that it was necessary to write the recipe, indicate the process progress, the reagents, a long task that could only be delivered in printed form the next day. There was a murmur, some even shouted, but the deputy delegate spoke and took responsibility for the result. At night, however, the doctor, realizing that his wife was asleep, jumped out of the window and ran straight to the cemetery. Cora, barefoot, with slippers in her hands, looked for the maid so they could go together to collect bones. Didn't find her, went alone, and Mrs. Amelia, seeing herself alone, guessed the walk and went there too. And so it happened throughout the city. The father, without saying anything to his son, left. The woman, thinking she was deceiving her husband, left. The sons, the daughters, the servants, the whole population, under the light of the haunted stars, rushed to the satanic rendezvous at the Sosego, and no one was missing. The richest and the poorest were there. It was the Turkish Miguel, it was Professor Pelino, Dr. Geronimo, Major Camanjo, Cora, the beautiful and dazzling Cora, with her beautiful alabaster fingers, rummaged through the tombs, tore off the flesh still rotten and tenaciously clinging to the bones, and filled her lap, which until then had been useless, with it. It was the dowry that he was reaping, and his nostrils, which opened into pink and almost transparent wings, they didn't feel the stench of rotting fabrics in stinking mud. Gentle, with that gentleness particular to the furious crowds, each one headed home with only one thought in mind, to immediately get as many dead bones as they could. Success arrived at the home of the railroad's resident engineer. At dinner, they talked about nothing else. The doctor summarized what he still knew about his course and stated that it was impossible. This was alchemy, a dead thing. Gold is gold, a simple body, and bone is bone, a compound, phosphate of lime. To think that one thing could be made into another was nonsense. Cora took advantage of the situation to laugh politely at the cruelty of those botacudos, but his mother, Lady Amelia, had faith that it was possible. Disagreement was not long in emerging. The dead were few and not enough to satisfy the hunger of the living. There were stabbings, gunshots, beatings. Pelino stabbed the Turk for a femur, and even between the families questions arose. Only the postman and his son did not fight. They walked together and agreed, and there was a time when the little boy, a smart 11-year-old child, even advised his father, "Daddy, let's go where Mommy is. She was so fat." In the morning, the cemetery had more dead than it had received in 30 years of existence. A single person had not been there, had not killed or desecrated graves. It was the drunk Belmiro. Entering a half-open shop and finding no one there, he filled a bottle of Parati and sat drinking on the banks of the Tubiacanga, watching its waters flow gently over the rough granite bed. Both he and the river were indifferent to what they had seen, even to the escape of the pharmacist, with his Potosi and his secret, under the eternal canopy of the stars. 11/1910, the end.
If you want to know about our canal, please follow us and share it.